Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all for sharing a little bit about yourselves. We are excited to know who we're talking with tonight. And with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our great lineup of speakers that we have tonight. So for starters, my name is Emma Searson. I am a policy and advocacy campaigner here at Solar United Neighbors. I'm just going to kick us off with a quick introduction to our organization and to tonight's topic, REAP. And then I'm really excited that we're going to hear from one of the top REAP experts in the country, Deb Yoakum, who is the Southern Regional Coordinator with USDA Rural Development. She's going to tell us all about the process of actually applying for a REAP solar grant. And then lastly, we are going to hear from Stuart Lavalier, who is one of the owners of Lavalier's Berry Patch in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and has received a REAP solar grant that he can tell us a little bit about. So without further ado, let me just start with a little bit more about Solar United Neighbors. I think our next slide is on its way. Maybe. All right, I seem to not be able to advance the slides. I don't know if Annie or Sarah, y'all are able to help with that, but I'm getting a little circle with a no line. Thanks for bearing with us, folks. Again, new platform, so we're just getting the hang of it here. Is anyone else able to take over those slides for me?
Ooh, I'm trying.
Okay. Thanks, Annie.
Let's see. Yeah, I'm getting a issue as well. Sarah, I'm going to make you the main presenter and see if that works.
Hopefully just one more minute here, folks. Perfect. Sarah has saved the day. All right. Thanks for your patience again. So just to share a little bit about Solar United Neighbors, we are a national nonprofit organization. We are not affiliated with any company or product. And we have field staff in 10 states, plus DC and Puerto Rico. And on the next slide, just to give a little bit of a picture of our impact, we have organized over 300 solar co-ops or group buy programs since our organization was first founded in 2007. Through these co-ops, we've helped more than 8,000 households, businesses, and nonprofit organizations go solar. And our co-ops have led to over 68 megawatts of installed and solar capacity across the country. Are we stuck on this slide? I see we've got, okay, cool. So I'll just go ahead and share a little bit more about Solar United Neighbors' theory of change while we get our slides figured out, and then hopefully by the time we get to REAP, they'll be working again. But our mission here at SUN is to help folks go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. We are working towards a new and a better energy system that everyone can participate in. And that means for us, one that it's fair and equitable and that puts rooftop solar at the cornerstone. So that is a little bit about us. And as soon as we get the slide deck working, then I'm excited to share a little bit more about what you're all actually here to learn about, which is REAP.
There we go.
The crickets in the background of Stuart's audio are just so perfect for this moment. Okay, one more slide and then we should be where we need to be. Okay, great. So REAP. First things first, I want to explain the acronym, and the next slide is perfect. REAP stands for the Rural Energy for America program. So it's a mouthful, that's why we call it REAP. It is a federally funded grant and loan program that helps farmers and rural business owners access renewable and efficient energy technologies. So REAP was first established back in 2002 as part of the Federal Farm Bill, and it's administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA's Office of Rural Development, which you might hear folks call RD, lots of acronyms. So as you might have heard me say, REAP provides both grants and loans. And it also can be used to fund a really wide variety of different clean energy technologies, including efficiency and solar technologies. But in tonight's webinar, we are just going to focus in on REAP grants for solar projects specifically. So with that said, why solar is a question some of you might be thinking. So knowing that we've got some business owners and farmers in the room tonight, I want to point out that there are quite a few very good reasons that any of you might want to be thinking about going solar and going solar through REAP in particular. So first, when you go solar, you are going to enjoy so much more energy choice and freedom because you are, by definition, deciding where you want your energy to come from, and you're going to have the ability to produce that energy yourself, which is a whole new level of independence. And going solar can also really reduce your business's energy costs, and it can also help you predict and control those costs in the future. So when you have solar, you're just not going to be as dependent on things like oil and gas prices that can fluctuate and can threaten your business's bottom line. And on a related note, powering your business with solar will improve your energy security, especially if you're able to pair your solar with on-site storage. So that would help you insulate your business from risks from things like power outages or fossil fuel supply chain issues, and just give you that extra layer of reliability. And then solar enables you to tap into this really amazing and abundant natural energy resource, the sun, that does not pollute our air, our water, or our climate. And then on top of all of those great reasons, solar has gotten so much more affordable over the last decade as the technology has matured, and programs like REAP can make it even more affordable for certain people. So in particular, going solar with a REAP grant can actually save up to 50% off of the cost of going solar. That's how much a REAP grant can cover. And if you receive a REAP grant, you can still take advantage of a few other federal programs. So that would include the Federal Solar Investment Tax Credit, or ITC, which can shave another 30% off of your total costs. And REAP can also be combined or stacked with other programs like the Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery System, or MACRS. So altogether, we're talking about a really substantial financial benefit for farms and rural businesses. So on the next slide, I want to take a minute to just explain some of the things that have changed recently with REAP and why it's such a great moment right now to be thinking about this program and applying for it. So REAP solar grants historically have always been in really high demand. This program has been very popular, and the budget has been nowhere near big enough to fund every project application. But thanks to the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, last year, the program is now seeing an unprecedented level of investment. So that just means there's a lot more REAP funding to go around than there has been in years past. So specifically, the IRA invested $1.7 billion of new funding into REAP over the next 10 years. And on top of that, the IRA lifted the limits of how large a grant any one project can receive. So the maximum grant size used to be set at 25% of your project's total costs, and that was capped at $500,000 for renewable systems. Now, those limits have been doubled. So the maximum grant size has been increased to 50% of your project's total costs, and the cap has also been increased to $1 million for renewable energy systems. One kind of small print but important note on that is that the new 50% maximum only applies to projects that use technologies that don't emit greenhouse gases. So solar definitely fits that bill, gets to benefit from that new 50% maximum, but not all technologies would. So we can move along to the next slide. And I just want to, drive home that the number one takeaway so far is that REAP grants can really help you power your farm or your rural business with solar and do that affordably. Since there is so much more funding going around, and because you have the ability to win a much larger grant than you would have been able to in years past, this really is a historic opportunity for farmers and for rural small business owners who stand to benefit from REAP. So in short, there's never been a better time to apply. And before I pass the microphone over to Deb with USDA to talk us through the REAP application process, I do just want to make sure that you all know about our REAP application guide. So this is a resource. There are just a couple screenshots up right now on the slide that we created to truly walk you through the process of filling out the REAP grant application for a solar project. It's very step-by-step. It's got a lot of detail. So in addition to getting a great overview and some good advice straight from USDA today, I hope you will head to our website if you haven't already and just download that guide. We will make sure to put this link in the chat, but it's also very simple. It's just solarunitedneighbors.org/REAP. So with that, I will pause here and hopefully, Deb, you can come off mute and take it from there.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Emma. Before I begin with the slides, I do want to take a moment to thank Solar United Neighbors for organizing such an informative event for us and for providing us with the opportunity to share with you more about the REAP program. We do really appreciate the partnership, and we hope to inform as many businesses and ag producers as possible so that they can take advantage of this great funding opportunity. And I'm going to need you to advance the slides for me, please, Sarah. Next slide. So today, the topics that I'm going to cover are, who is eligible for a REAP grant, what you need to know in order to apply for the program, and how you submit a successful REAP application. Next slide. So while the range of opportunity with REAP is widely spread across all types of commercially available renewable energy technologies, in addition to energy efficiency improvements, the focus tonight is going to be on solar, and specifically on those projects that are total project costs of $80,000 or less. $80,000 or less is the smallest application threshold, and applications which request a grant of $20,000 or less are also able to take advantage of a funding set aside that we have available. Next slide. So two groups are going to be eligible for REAP grants, ag producers and rural small businesses. And ag producers must receive at least 50% or more of their income from ag operations. Ag producers may apply for projects that are located in rural areas or in non-rural areas, as long as there's production on site. When we talk about a rural area for rural development, we're typically looking at a population of 50,000 or less. Rural small businesses need to be located, have their projects located in a rural area. And we have an eligibility map, which is on the slide, where you can go in, put the address of your project, and see if it's located in the rural area in order to qualify for our funding. Rural small business must meet one of the four criteria: either be a private for-profit entity, a cooperative, a rural electric utility, so it provides services to rural customers and operates independent of government control, or a tribal entity or tribal business corporation. Those rural small businesses also must be small and meet the definition as published by the SBA. The one thing to note about REAP is that we do not fund residential projects. The applicant for REAP must be operating an actively engaged business in a rural area that's going to sell or use the solar power that's generated. Next slide. So, as was noted in an earlier screen, the investment in REAP due to the Inflation Reduction Act has provided quite a bit of additional funding to the program, as well as has increased the maximum grant threshold for projects. So renewable energy projects, which do not produce greenhouse gases, such as solar, are eligible for up to 50% of the cost of the solar panels, inverters, balance of system, etc., and their installation cost. The maximum request cannot exceed $1 million. We do have a minimum project size for renewable energy systems, and that's $10,000. We also provide energy efficiency improvements under REAP, so I wanted to briefly mention those. Those thresholds were also increased from $250,000 to a $500,000 grant, and the minimum project size there is 6,000. So this slide will show you just how versatile the REAP program is and the types of technologies and all the types of improvements that the REAP program can help with. Next slide. So REAP grants are competitive, and each grant receives a score with a maximum of 100 points available. As was noted, Solar United Neighbors has developed a guide which offers a step-by-step process on how to file the REAP application, and it also includes the scoring information. REAP applications have 4 quarterly batch deadlines. So we take an application at any point in time, but we review them on a quarterly basis. So they're scored relative to the applications that are competing during that quarter. The USDA regulations allow us to reserve at least 20% of the annual funding that we have available for those grants of $20,000 or less. So again, those applications have a greater chance of award because they're not competing with the larger projects that are requesting more award dollars. And then those applications are must be completed by June 30th. Any applications after that June 30th deadline all compete in the larger pool of funds. So they still have an opportunity to be awarded. They're just competing in a larger pool or a larger competition. Next slide. So an important provision with the REAP program is that you must complete and submit a complete application with an environmental review before you start your project or before you start incurring costs. So after you have an idea of what you want to do, you get some detailed quotes from installers, go ahead and file the application, and then ensure that you're in correspondence with rural development staff, who will then advise you once they review the application that it is indeed a complete application and that the environmental review has been completed, after which time you can actually spend money, start the project at your own risk. If you start the project before you have a complete application, or if you start it before you have a complete environmental review, the project may not be eligible for funding. Next slide. So a few things that you will need to file the REAP application are listed on this slide. So the first is registering your business entity in the System for Award Management, which is known as SAM. And you will get a unique entity identifier when you have successfully registered, which you will submit with the application. SAM registration can take a while, so this is really an important start to your project, and you want to pay special attention when you register so that you're making sure that you are using, the same business name, the same spelling of it, the same address, etc. So it's really important to get that right. The entity that's going to own the REAP project is the entity that should be registered in the System for Award Management that will also file the application. You're going to need to gather some supporting documentation before you register in SAM. Again, exact legal names, exact address, exact case sensitivity. If you don't, it's going to get flagged, and then your application for the SAM registration will be delayed. You can go to sam.gov for more information about that process. But once you're successfully registered in the SAM, you're going to get a UEI and provide that to the agency. All REAP applicants need to own and control the systems that are going to be financed for the useful life of the project. So documentation such as tax statements, business licensure, or a lease agreement that shows that you're going to own the equipment and own the site is going to be required. You're going to need a detailed bid or quote for the project. And we always recommend that you get multiple quotes in order for you to compare the pricing between the vendors. And it's also beneficial to get detailed quotes. So meaning the costs are broken down, right? So we see the solar panels, the number of solar panels, the price per solar panel, the number of inverters, the installation costs, all broken down on the bid is going to be very helpful for us. Unless the project is 100% off grid, we also want to see documentation that you have engaged with your utility provider. So how much power are they willing to purchase? What price are they going to purchase that for, etc. And lastly, we want to know how you're going to fund the remainder of the project. So again, if a solar project, you can go up to 50% in a REAP grant. Where's the other 50% coming from? Do you have money in the bank? Provide a bank statement. Are you getting a loan through a lender? Provide a lender letter that is going to approve that loan. And just note that the REAP application process was designed to be a tiered process. So the larger the total project cost, the more information that is going to be required in the application. Next slide. So there's 5 main forms that you're going to need when you submit a REAP application. The first one is one of the 3 tiers of the 4280-3 forms. Again, for the projects of 80,000 or less, it's the 4280-3A form. You're then also going to need the SF424, 424C, and 424D form, and those are quite simplistic. And then we also need the environmental information as part of the application submission. Next slide, please. Our forms are all posted to our rural development website. If you go to the REAP website, there's a To Apply tab where you can take a look at all the forms that you need to apply. And then rural development also has a state energy coordinator in every state that is available to help you ensure you have the right forms, answer any questions you may have about eligibility or the program in general. And we would encourage you to reach out to that state energy coordinator where your project's going to be located with any questions that you may have. Next slide. And as noted earlier, after you submit your application, you should wait and get confirmation from a rural development staff person that the application is complete and no further information is required. So if you've started construction or maybe you have a project that you've already completed in full, those are not going to be eligible for REAP. You have to file your complete application, get the environmental review, and then you can start the project. For the REAP program, you do have 24 months to complete your project. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will turn it back over to Emma. And if you have questions, we'll take them at the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deb. That's all so helpful and informative and exactly right. If you have questions, I've already seen some good ones coming into the chat. I'm taking notes of those. Keep them coming, and we will have time at the end for some Q&A. And in the meantime, I'm excited to pass the microphone over to our next speaker, Stuart Lavalier, to share a little bit about his experience applying for a REAP solar grant on his farm. So Stuart, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Stuart, you should be unmuted.
All right, give us a minute, folks, that we're figuring out Stuart's audio. All right, looks like you're unmuted, Stuart, if you want to give it a try. Oh, just lost him. All right, let's sit tight for just 1 minute. And if Stuart doesn't come back in that minute, we can do some Q&A and then come back to Stuart later. Yes, so true, Bobby. I was enjoying the crickets in the background. Maybe we'll get to hear some more.
Okay.
Oh, I think I can hear you, Stuart, if you want to go ahead.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Well, good. We have a farm up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, where we've strawberries, blueberries, apples, tarches, and we have some fruits and some vegetables with it. But there's myself picking apples on the left-hand side, and that's someone working at the farm on the right-hand side with the strawberries. But uh, the idea of the solar panels started probably 10 years ago when I attended a conference in the wintertime, and a fellow grower had installed solar panels on his farm. And I just, after listening to him, and I just thought to myself, this is something that I think we need to do at our farm. And the opportunity came up this with the REAP grant this past year. I filled out. I didn't fill out the REAP application. Actually, I had filled out applications for grants in the past, but I wanted to really give myself a better chance of receiving this grant. So we went with a grant writer, and he was so helpful, and I thought the cost was very minimum. And so when he eventually filled out the application initially, the score that we had that he came up with said that we're just on the borderline. And after that, we talked to our solar installers and asked if there were some things that they could do to maybe give us a better chance with this application. And they did make some changes, and as a result, I think that we were able to receive the REAP grant. We had a lot of help with the state energy coordinator in making sure that we had all the forms filled out, and that took a little time, but I think we certainly had the help we needed. But so I'm not okay. Can can you still hear me?
Yes, you sound fine.
Okay, I'm sorry, I lost the screen here. I'm just using my phone, but
No
this is the
worries.
initial this is the initial installation. It was took place in the wintertime. We were hoping that it would start a little earlier than that, but we did start it in around January 1st. Those are two slides that show the initial installation. Uh, Actually, they came in and put the footings in earlier in the fall, and then the actual panels that came later. Maybe you could go to the next slide. Yeah, this is the final uh, panels as they're up. And I was pleased that even though we had a really snowy winter, for the most part, the panels stayed clear. They may have gotten a little bit snow on them, but they seem to leave shortly after on a sunny day. Next slide. Okay, because our farm deals with the public as they come out and pick berries at our farm or apples, we needed to put a fencing or a 4-foot fence around the entire installation. And that was something that we did ourselves. And that was a little bit of additional expense. I think if you have the situation where people are coming out to your business, that may be something you'll have to think about as well. Next slide. This goes on. This is a different business here. So, but I can tell you a little bit about our solar energy that we get starting in January. Uh, our actually energy costs are quite small at the farm. We have coolers where we store our produce. That is the main energy draw. But the solar energy that's produced from these panels pays for our energy bill and probably gives us an additional $300, which we get as a check each month. And that was a nice surprise, and it's been very good to have that as an income coming each month. But I'm real happy with the solar installation. I think it says to the people that we're concerned about leaving a footprint on this earth when we leave, and we try to do lots of different things on our farm to be sustainable in the water usage, in the soil cover crops that we use, and this is just one more thing. I think it shows the people that we care, and to me that means a lot. And people have been very curious about it and wondering how much it costs and how much energy we save and so forth. In our situation, I don't live on the farm. I live about 3 hours away, so I commute up to the farm just about every week. I stay at the farm during the week and then travel back to our home in Minneapolis. My goal is in the next year or two to get an electric vehicle that we can charge at our home and then bring up here and charge up here. And I think that would just be what we really are thriving for to really reduce our input of gas. So, but anyway, yeah, I just want to say that I'm happy with the program, and I was pleased with all the help that we were given. Thank you for listening.
Apply to this wonderful program and a little bit about your story. So we really appreciate you sharing. We are going to start answering questions here in just a moment. So if you have questions for Stuart, for Deb, for myself, please do. You can click that Ask a Question button and put them right in the Q&A, where I will guaranteed I'll be able to see them. But before we do that, I do want to plug just a couple of great resources that I hope everyone will take advantage of coming out of this conversation. You can find them all through this link that we are going to put in the chat now. I'm dropping it in. So that is kind of a hub where you can find multiple different resources about REAP. For one, you can read more about the program on USDA's website. That is linked on our page. You can also download the step-by-step REAP application guide I mentioned earlier from that same spot. And one thing I didn't mention earlier and want to make sure I do is that we have this new timed email series that will walk you through the process of taking your business solar from start to finish. It's called Ready, Set, Solar, and you can sign up to get those timed emails through the resources section at the bottom of that page in the chat. You can also, from that same page, you can contact our solar help desk with any questions you might have. If you're having trouble with your utility or have a question about a proposal from an installer, we can help with those sort of things. And then there are a few others as well. So definitely take note of that resource page and hold on to it for the future. Okay, so with that all said, I do see lots of good questions coming. So I'm going to go ahead and pose a couple of those to our panelists here. One from a while ago, I'm scrolling up in the Q&A here, is I think a good one for Deb, and that's if REAP can apply for community solar farms.
Yeah, so the question was if REAP could apply for community solar farms. And again, it depends on how the project is structured. Again, a residential house couldn't just apply directly for REAP, but if you perhaps have a utility company that is offering solar to community solar type subscriptions, we could possibly entertain that. So we would just need to see how that's structured.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And I think a lot of these kind of, really specific situations might have similar answers, right? That it depends on how the specific project is structured. One, though, that we get a lot, I know I saw it in the chat a couple of times. I think Corey, who on our team is helping answer some questions, may have answered, but just to make sure we spend a moment on it, is about applicability to nonprofits. So, generally speaking, REAP is for businesses, for for-profit businesses, and is not a program that can fund solar for nonprofits. But I did see a couple specific questions, like a farm that's operating within a nonprofit or things like that. Deb, I don't know if there's a little bit more clarity that you can provide on that topic.
Sure, absolutely. So if there's an ag producer that is organized as a nonprofit, yet they meet the definition of ag producer, so 50% or more of their gross revenue is coming from the sale of ag products, etc., they would definitely be eligible for REAP. And then in addition, there were the 4 different categories of real small business. The first was a private for-profit entity. Obviously, that has to be a for-profit entity. But then we also have cooperatives, electric utilities, and tribal corporations. And so with those 3 entities, they can be for-profit or nonprofit as long as they meet our REAP definition. And again, if there's any specific questions or you don't quite know for sure if you qualify, that's where your state energy coordinator is going to be able to help you and help answer those questions for you.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's super helpful. So Deb, I hope you don't feel too peppered here, but I've got a couple more questions that I think are going to be in your technical wheelhouse. So if you don't mind, I'm going to keep the spotlight on you for a minute here. I've seen a couple of different questions in the chat about hiring REAP grant writers and whether those costs, like the costs of a professional grant writer, can be included in your REAP application, like if those costs are eligible for REAP reimbursement. Are you able to explain that?
Sure, I can address that. So unfortunately, the cost to write the grant application cannot be included in the application because that happens prior to, right? So with REAP, the costs are going to be incurred after the date of a complete application. But with that said, we are working on a electronic input system that's going to hopefully be able to simplify the program, help you better understand it to where you may not need that grant writer. Also with the Inflation Reduction Act, we've added some technical assistance programs to the mix to where we hopefully have some more providers out there that can help you with the REAP grants so that you don't have to incur those costs.
Great. That definitely makes sense. Yes. And I think, for some folks, like I know for Stuart, working with a professional grant writer was really helpful. If you've got really limited time, that can be useful. And for others, if you can take advantage of some of those additional resources, ask questions, it may not be something that you need. So that's helpful to know. So we also frequently get questions about how you can, or if you can, apply for REAP if your home and your business are hooked up, on the same electrical service. So I know we got that question from Tim, if there's anything you can do if your home and your business share electrical service. And someone else also asked, like, a little bit more specifically, if there's anything you can do to separate out your business electric use and costs from your residential ones. Is that something you would be able to explain, Deb?
Sure. We see this question a lot, especially for, ag producers out there in the country that have 1 meter and both their residence as well as their farm are on the same meter. So we have a couple of options here. The first is if you're going to install a renewable energy system, you have a separate meter, right? So you separate that renewable energy resource to your business. That's one option. The other option is if you don't want to have a separate meter, we would have to do some additional steps. Those steps would be to determine how much energy the residence is consuming versus how much energy your business is consuming. So typically we take your total utility bills over the past 12 months. And then typically it's to determine, what the residence uses and subtract that off. And the business needs to use at least 51% or more of their proposed energy to be generated. So if your business is going to use that 51% or more of that energy, we could do that on the same meter, but we would then go through some calculations and we would prorate. So again, the REAP grant would only benefit the ag producer or business operation. We couldn't have that power benefiting the residents.
Very helpful. We get that question a lot. Sounds like you do too. So it's great to hear that there are a couple different options for folks to explore to make REAP a possibility for them. Stuart, I also am seeing a couple questions for you. Folks are wondering if there's anything you can share about how you and your installer thought about improving your chances of getting a REAP grant, like what exactly you're thinking about for your project and how you could improve it.
it was going to, I believe there's a 10-year payback. They'd like to have a 10-year payback, and ours was a little bit more than that. So I think that there was a little bit of something they could make adjustments on the panels themselves. Uh, so I think maybe they had sourced the panels from a different company and was able to get a little better price. And the
Wow.
price kind of changed a little bit during the project. I think that is probably happening all the time with new technologies.
Definitely. Yes.
Was there something else,
Changes
Emma?
quickly. No, that's great. Thank you so much. I know that payback period is very important, so it's good to know that that's what you were fiddling with. One question I always like to ask folks who receive REAP grants is if you just have anything in terms of like a lesson learned or a top piece of advice you want to share with folks who are listening tonight and thinking about maybe applying for a REAP grant.
I asked a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions all the time, and I just thought that I wanted to know what was done, what needed to be done, and I wanted to make sure that I did it right. And so I remember calling the state coordinator and the grant writer, and really, yeah, not hesitating to ask, for help. And I felt that we always got it.
Wonderful. That's good life advice, and definitely great advice for REAP. I know Deb mentioned that there are, the state energy coordinators who are, going to be able to respond to questions and, kind of get specific with you about your scenario and your project. So I think that's a great lesson for folks to walk home with today.
Oh, can
And
I
then, yeah,
say
please go ahead,
one
Stuart.
more thing, Emma?
Mhm.
Yeah, just one quick thing. Our installation is a 27 kilowatt installation, and the state will give you a certain price for your electricity up to, I think it was 35 kilowatts. And I wish now would have gone to the maximum amount. So I think maybe the concern might be find out, that how much you can afford is one factor, and that was a factor that limited us. But now, a year later, I think I would have liked to go a little bit bigger, and maybe I think that go to the maximum. And I was told go beyond the maximum because then you're really gonna the price is much lower. So get the best benefit out of it.
That
Okay,
makes sense.
that's it.
And actually, Stuart, just while you were talking, I got another question for you. So while you're off mute, if you don't mind, Ed is wondering if your panels are set up to grow crops underneath them, or if you have any other things like taking advantage of shade for crops as well. I don't know if that's true for your project.
Well, Emma, that's a good question, and we put ours where they're located because there is no obstruction, so get the most sun. And after we started the installation, I listened to a couple conferences or webinars, I guess, on solar installation and agriculture. And I thought to myself, I'd like to try some different installations. And some of these had solar panels on both sides, and they were used for shading of the plant during certain parts of the day. And I thought that's kind of intriguing. It might be kind of a fun thing to do. With our fencing that we have, I'd like to either put in sheep or possibly put in chickens. And so that's something that I think we will add in the future, not only to keep the grass down, but also I think it'll be good for our business to when people come out to see what can be done.
Absolutely, yeah. The whole world of agrivoltaics, of combining. Sorry, I'm near a honking horn if you're hearing that. But the whole field of combining, agriculture with solar is moving fast. It's a very exciting space. So we'll all be curious to hear how it goes if you are able to introduce some sheep or chickens. That sounds great.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much, Stuart. Deb, I think this question is going to take us back to you, and it's from a little while ago in the chat, but someone raised a question about distressed communities. So I wanted to just go back to the scoring for REAP, if you wouldn't mind for a minute, and talking about some of those newer changes in REAP scoring and how those might benefit some folks in the audience.
Sure. So with the IRA, we were able to make some revisions to not only the percentage of grant requests that's eligible, but also to where we wanted to focus the REAP benefits. So distressed communities is definitely something that we want to target grant funds towards. So you will see in the scoring criteria for REAP that there is a benefit if you're locating your project within that area. We also have links available that we can provide so you can look up and see where those distressed communities are located.
That sounds great. Thank you. And here's another pretty specific one for you, Deb. Someone asked about Form 194020, if you happen to know those form numbers off the top of your head. Their question is that they thought that form was no longer required, and they're wondering if it's still recommended, if it makes your application more favorable, and it's still something worth doing.
So unfortunately, I do know all about that form.
I thought you might, yeah.
That the 1940-20 form is the old environmental intake form that went along with our old environmental regulation. So when we updated to a new environmental regulation, the 1970, that form should no longer be used. But we do have what's called an environmental checklist. Again, it's a guide that gathers as much information as possible on your project and on the ways that your project may affect environmental resources. And that's what we need to have with an application is, just some of the basic information in order for us as an agency to determine what type of an environmental review is needed and, to what level we need to look at environmental actions. So for example, if you're just putting a solar panel on top of a barn that you have on your farm, that's going to be a lot less intrusive versus someone that's maybe building an anaerobic digester on their farm and is disturbing a lot of ground or clearing trees or that type of thing. So it is important that we have environmental information that comes in with the application in order for it to be considered a complete application. And that's really what the environmental checklist is there to do, is to take the place of that old 1940-20 form. When we get the application in, if we have questions or need more information, we'll reach out to you to get that information so we can complete our environmental review.
Should be very helpful. Thank you for digging in on that form. And I was suspicious that you might know the form numbers off the top of your head. I thought that was right. So I am also scrolling up here in the questions and seeing one about American-made products and whether there are requirements for those. I wonder if that might actually be coming from, with the IRA or IRA, there have been so many different recent incentives and programs for clean energy. They all have different requirements, so it can be really easy to get your wires crossed and get confused about which apply to which. So it's my understanding that there are no American-made product requirements for REAP. Deb, I'm hoping you can confirm or deny, and that those are instead through a tax credit bonus program.
Right. So as far as the REAP program is concerned, we do not have to follow any of the American-made provisions unless the entity is a federal, non-federal entity, which is like a state or a tribe, etc. So, again, it's always great if we can try to use American-made products. We definitely want to promote that, but we don't have any requirements in the REAP program for that unless, again, it falls within the purview of a non-federal entity, which most of our REAP applicants don't.
Right, absolutely, that makes sense. Okay, well, I think we probably have time for just one, maybe two more questions, and I'm seeing here at the end of one is another question that I hear all the time, which is whether REAP can help pay for batteries. Is that something you can speak to as well, Deb?
Sure. So, and I was actually going to mention this, Stuart, when you were talking about, the potential for expanding on your solar PV that you currently have installed. So with REAP, we can do new installations of renewable energy systems. We can also do retrofits of existing systems, and we can include battery storage along with those solar systems. What's really important is that when you look for an installer, or you're looking for sizing your system, that you really know and have a good understanding and convey that in the application in terms of how the energy will be used, why you're sizing the system the way you're sizing it, why you're sizing the storage the way that you're going to size it. So just a standalone, I'm going to buy a battery is not eligible. But if you have a solar system and you want to add a battery, that would be considered a retrofit. Or you could come in with a new application for a renewable energy system that also includes storage. As long as the technology is commercially available, that's definitely something we can entertain.
Really helpful, and I think good to know, especially as the buyback rates that folks are able to access for their solar can vary over time. Sometimes it might really make sense financially to invest in a battery to pair with your solar. So thank you for addressing that. So since we just have a few more minutes here, I want to move us along to our final slide and make sure that we just have a couple of minutes to wrap up and make sure you all have the right resources that you need coming out of this great event. So first, I will say I've seen this question in the chat a couple times, is whether we're recording and sharing that recording, and whether we're going to be sharing our slides. The answer is yes. We will be following up with everyone who RSVP'd to this event, and we'll make sure to share a recording in case you missed any parts of the conversation, and we'll also share the presentation. And then we will also be sure to flag the resources that we've shared in the chat tonight. And we've highlighted a couple of those on this last slide. So once more, at the solarunitedneighbors.org/REAP link, you can download our very specific REAP application guide for kind of a step-by-step walkthrough of the process. You can also learn a lot more about the REAP program and get into a lot of the specific questions about eligibility and at USDA's REAP page, which is the second one we have listed here. And then the last one that we've just highlighted here is our help desk. As I mentioned earlier, we can answer kind of basic solar questions and REAP questions at that email address. So you're welcome to reach out to us here at Sun there. So I think that's all we have for everyone tonight. I'm not seeing any last minute questions coming in the chat, so we can go ahead and wrap up. I just want to thank our speakers so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And again, thank everyone for joining and learning more about this great program. We appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. Bye.
I know.